Hello and welcome to another edition of Free Money NFL Week 7 edition. We had a bounce back week on the betting sides of things, going 2 for 3. That brings our record up to 11 for 18 on the season. On the fantasy end, we had a little bit of a setback, but we're going to right the ship this week. Let's get right into it, full steam ahead. On the fantasy side, start Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan has preyed on weak defenses this season. In Week 1, he threw for 400 yards against the Seahawks. Then he had 36 points in Week 2 against the Cowboys. And last week, he had nearly 40 points against the Vikings. What do all of these defenses have in common with Detroit, who's going to face Matt Ryan this week? They are all easier to score on than a hooker. Detroit has allowed 10 touchdown passes and an average of just over 20 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks. What's more, just one opposing quarterback has failed to score at least 18 points against them after 6 weeks. Matt Ryan's starting to get into a groove. He's starting to feel himself after a big performance last week. It looks like he's on the same page with Julio Jones. They all seem to be clicking. Start Matt Ryan, who's going to feast on this Detroit defense. Start David Johnson. Johnson is averaging 12 points a game this season. While that's nothing to write home about, the floor is high for Johnson, so even in a bad game, you can salvage at least 10 points. He's had some bad luck this year too, so those averages should be higher. The Texans have trailed nearly every game, so they're always forced to abandon the run and throw, and Deshaun Watson overthrew him in the end zone in Week 5, which cost him some points. But this week, Johnson gets a nice matchup against the Packers defense that's allowed the most points to running backs. Green Bay has also allowed 19 plus points to 4 running backs in their first 5 contests. Case in point, last week they allowed 113 yards to Ronald Jones. Johnson had at least 18 touches in Houston's last 3 games. He is my start of the week for running backs in Week 7. Start DeAndre Swift. Now this is a boom or bust kind of pick, but if you want a daily fantasy bargain with Swift, this is the guy to pick up. He's only going to cost you about $5,000, and he's been productive in recent weeks. He only played 38% of snaps last week, and he still managed to rack up 27 fantasy points. The Falcons have not allowed a rushing touchdown since Week 2, so that could be a red flag, but they're due to give up a rushing touchdown, so why not this week, or why not to Swift? Now, where the Falcons do look favorable against Swift is they've been vulnerable to backs that catch passes, and that's where Swift does the majority of his work. You want to save money for some other studs in your daily fantasy lineup and get a player that has the potential to boom? DeAndre Swift is your man. Start Chase Claypool. This one's simple for me. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Claypool has been an absolute fantasy dream come true for those who are lucky or smart enough to pick him up in the last couple weeks. In fact, no wideout has scored more points over the last 2 weeks. He's had 60.7. Claypool has also managed to produce 17 plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. He's clearly gained the trust of veteran quarterback Ben Roethlisberger and what seems to be a receiver factory over there. They just keep producing good receivers, but Claypool is the next in line. This week they're facing the Titans, who have allowed the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. So, hop on the Chase Claypool fantasy bandwagon this week. Finally, start T. Higgins. Last week, Higgins caught 6 of 8 targets for a season-high 125 yards against a stout Colts secondary. That included a 67-yard catch that set up an early Joe Mixon touchdown. Higgins has got some speed, and he's beginning to emerge as the Bengals' #1 wideout, and is starting to see more targets than A.J. Green, which is a good sign for fantasy owners who want to pick him up this week. This week, they face the Browns' defense is allowing 194 receiving yards per game to wide receivers. This is the 5th highest total in the league. They've also given up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers this season, so start T. Higgins this week. On to the betting side of things. Take the Chargers over the Jaguars. The Chargers are favored by 7.5 points, which seems like a lot for a team with a losing record. But the Chargers are coming off a bye week, so Justin Herbert has had the most time to prepare for a game ever as an NFL starter. So don't let the Chargers record scare you. They've lost some really close games to excellent teams, like the Buccaneers and the Saints. Both those games they probably should have won. The Chargers are 3-1-1 against the spread this year, despite only being off to a 1-4 start. That's because they've only lost by a total of 18 points during their 4-game losing streak. So they have been in some very close games against much better competition. And this week they're facing some inferior competition. Justin Herbert this year has 1,195 yards, thrown for 9 touchdowns, and the offense is averaging 397 yards per game with him under center. The Jaguars defense, meanwhile, ranks 27th in the league in opponents' quarterback rating. So look for them to cover this week. Joey Bosa, he can get after the quarterback. This is the same defensive unit that gave Patrick Mahomes trouble, so they should have no problem with Gardner Minshew. Take the Chargers this week. Take the Saints over the Panthers. Like the Chargers, the Saints are favored by 7.5. Drew Brees is coming off a bye, and Michael Thomas is returning. This is good news for the Saints. When you have a veteran quarterback like Drew Brees with an extra week to prepare against a divisional opponent, I suspect we'll see the best version of him. Drew Brees has been completing over 70% of his passes this season as well. So, as much as the arm strength looks like it's been shot, he's still been pretty effective this year, and now he's getting his number one weapon back. Panthers defense has been very ineffective against the run as well. So that also bodes well for the Saints. The Panthers are giving up 4.9 yards allowed per rushing attempt, which is 27th in the league. That's an appetizing matchup for Alvin Kamara, who ranks first in scrimmage yards, first in touchdowns, and second in broken tackles. The Panthers quarterback, Teddy Bridgewater, he played for the Saints for the majority of last season, so they have an ample amount of film on him and experience playing against him in practice. They know his tendencies. The Saints won the last 2 meetings, and I smell Saints in a blowout in this one. Right with the Saints, 7.5. Finally, take the Packers over the Texans. This is my pick of the week. The Packers have never lost 2 straight games under Matt LaFleur, and they are not about to start now. Packers were humiliated last week against the Bucs in a national TV game. When you have a good coach, a good quarterback, and you've been humiliated on national television, you're probably going to bounce back next week. So, it was an uncharacteristic game for Rodgers. He threw 2 interceptions. Those have been the Packers' only 2 turnovers this season. That's not going to happen again. Packers don't turn the ball over. Aaron Rodgers has had to listen to critics all week, so the redemption tour is going to roll into Houston, and boy do I feel sorry for the Texans defense. There is a reason they are 1-5 this year, and it's not Deshaun Watson. The defense reeks. They are 30th in total yards, 31st in opponent passer rating, last in rushing yards allowed, and last in big plays allowed. The Texans just gave up 36 points in regulation to the Titans and have allowed 4 of their 6 opponents to crack the 30-point plateau. Packers, meanwhile, are averaging 38 points per game indoors this season. That's where this game is being played, indoors in Houston. And since Rodgers took over as the number 1 gunslinger in Green Bay, the Packers have posted a 39-29-1 mark against the spread, coming off a loss. That is good enough for 57%. As a Bears fan, it makes me sick to say this. Packers are going to roll in this one. It's a layup this week. Hey, thank you so much for listening. That's all we have for you. If you like the video, make sure to like it or drop a comment below and subscribe to our channel. And as always, enjoy your football Sunday.